Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another Brony Debates Live. I hope you're all doing well out there. We have got a doozy of a topic tonight, and I am really looking forward to it. I'm going to be learning a lot, so we'll give you a little bit of background here. In case you didn't know, it was a couple of months ago, I believe, and I forget exactly which stream it was on, but we were having a debate, and Cordero was talking about Starship Troopers. And that somehow led into, what is the original definition of fascism. Hariman here, who was in the chat at the time, disagreed with what Cordero had said about the definition of fascism. And that led ultimately to us wanting to do this debate of capitalism versus communism. And joining us for that, as you can see in the thumbnail, we've got Cordero and Hariman. How's it going tonight, Cordero?
Hey guys, what's going on? I'm doing good.
Good. And Hariman, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. And I would say that tonight we're going to play the game How Long Before Hariman Puts His Foot in His Mouth? But I already did in the pre-stream.
Yeah, that'll happen sometimes. Listen, I do it to myself twice a day before we go live. And then I do it at least 3 times during every single one of my streams. You get used to it eventually. You just gotta kind of own it. So in the meantime, if you would like to get on the show, I would love to have you. We'll just get you on to the Patreon or Subscribe Star for as little as $1 a month. There's other ways to support the channel if you like what you see. I'm very grateful to all the support, especially those on the $10 and up tier. This big long list: Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministries, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Senko, DJ Skywalker, Rein-Kun, Morningstar, Pony Cordero, who's with us, QFlash, Billy Henline, Alden, MacManx, EasyModeGamer, Kanto Acrylic VA, Mr. Sonic 31, Ridge the Hedgehog, Alicia Lynette, Zeta Z, Sniper Nighter, and Dark Malcontent, author of the Metaverse series. Check out all their links in the description. So, here's what we're going to be doing tonight. I am, for the most part, going to be sitting back, moderating, asking questions, and learning while these two go at it with, I do believe they know a little bit more than I do on certain topics. And while I tend to lean center right on a lot of topics, so with that, I'm going to be a little bit more neutral, and I'll fully admit I don't know as much about the history as these two gentlemen might do. So with that all said, Cordero, you had mentioned to me even before that aforementioned stream that you had wanted to have a conversation like this. What made you want to have this debate?
I think re-examining modern governments is really useful, especially as new generations come in and get new ideas, or not actually no ideas new, just getting ideas about how these governments work and like what's the best. Like there's even people questioning, like, is America's Constitution even valuable? Is the First Amendment valuable? Like people bring stuff like that up. Like is freedom of speech as important as protecting people? And like my generation growing up, there was very obvious answers for that. But now it's more of an open discussion towards like, well, is the First Amendment harmful? And I'm still in the camp that I grew up with of no, and you'll be sorry if you get rid of it. But there's a lot of people who genuinely think that the way we look at things, what we think is fair and free and equal, or should be fair and free and equal, is absolutely not. And that, I think that really just boils down to a re-examining of how society should be set up.
Interesting.
Basically what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, so Harriman, what made you want to come on and have this debate? Aside from getting into is it comments or chats fight with Cordero on that one stream?
I'm here to defend the free market and how it is the only economic system that works. And I'm also here to defend the truth of definitions that's been lost over time, which I will explain more as the debate goes on tonight. Actually,
Okay.
no. I could explain that now, though.
All right, I can give it to you. Hit me with it.
the big thing that started the big heavy argument for me in the comments was Cordero saying that there's no definition of fascism,
I didn't say
and
that.
not that there's no definition of fascism, but that it's so muddled that we might as well just throw it out and not use the word. And my argument is the definition of fascism has been muddled because people who are using fascism don't want it applied to socialism because they're also socialists.
Okay.
So they've been splitting fascism, socialism, and the results of both of those from the names, but they're still doing the same thing.
So I'll cut in for a second here. As far as I can tell, the end result of socialism and fascism end up being the same. So much so that when I look at situations, not only do I see people who claim to be socialist, they end up trying to implement a lot of fascist uh, policy, would be the right word for it. So ultimately, what I'm saying is I can't tell the difference. Now, Cordero, what exactly did you say? And we'll start with your definitions, and then we'll go out from there.
Well, okay, so I considered fascism a dead word. A lot of historians agree that fascism is a dead word. It's not that we want to shy away from the history or the original definition. It's that at some point it becomes screaming into the wind because it's one of those words that fascism just becomes whatever the person saying it wants it to mean, which is what makes it a dead word. And like without defining fascism, because I'm even on like Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of fascism. Without defining fascism, it's actually easier to talk about where the history of the concept came about, because that literally gives you a better perspective than a definition such as this one: a political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation and often race above the individual, and that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader. See, the problem with this definition is that it's putting a lot of cause and effect history into the definition instead of just saying what the philosophy of fascism is.
So
It's
that
it's
begs the
it's taking
question.
history. Yeah, it's taking history and then going back and saying, well, this is what fascism kind of turned into, so that's now the definition of it. When the idea of fascism was sort of like this, it is a political philosophy, it was a movement or regime. It does exalt nation over individual. Um, but I hesitate to put it that it's meant to put race over the individual, because that did happen. Fascist organizations ended up being grouped together by race, like the one party. I mean, the biggest example is the freaking Nazis, right? Uh, is that the regime makes race part of the doctrine, but the original idea of fascism was basically just a one-party meritocracy where the best and brightest are what guides the future. That's like the charitable way of putting it. Um, and basically this like elite class uh would be basically what controls the company, and it would be a large group of people, um especially when compared to aristocracy, because when fascism was becoming an idea, it was coming off of aristocracy, where it's like a divine right to rule king or queen, and royal family ruled everything, and they were like, well, these inbred idiots aren't fit to rule anything. Who should be fit to rule? Well, the best and brightest should be fit to rule, the smartest, the people who can lift the nation up. So this idea of nation over self uh, came to be, where it's like, if we just listen to our most capable, then our nation will grow stronger, and then we'll all be better. And that's what developed into fascism and had disastrous results.
Interesting. So so you're saying that's the original definition. Then
I would call that the history of it.
okay.
It's, for me, it's hard to do it. The definition, in my opinion, should be bare bones. It should be like, if I'm going to use Webster's, I would edit theirs to say a political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation above the individual and stands for a centralized autocratic government. That's correct. Uh, Autocratic government headed by a one party leader. This is a dictatorial leader, but again, you're putting the cart after the horse or whatever. Like that's what happened eventually in the long run. And this happens all the time. Like you said it yourself, can't tell the difference between fascism and socialism, and all is the same thing. That's a result of cause and effect. The ideologies of fascism and socialism, or fascism and communism, are mutually exclusive. They are so far apart that they are quite literally the opposite ends of this political spectrum. But the irony or the intriguing paradox is that when we try to make a pure government system based on either, it ends up coming back to single party dictator leader. So you saying, I can't tell the difference, you're looking at the end results, but it's very easy to tell the difference in the ideology itself. It just fails into dictatorship.
Interesting. So, Hariman, what was your grievance with his demonstration of the history of it?
My disagreement is he hasn't gone back far enough, so he hasn't gotten to the actual core of what fascism is. And fascism's definition is even simpler than the current dictionary definition. Fascism is state control via an alliance between the public institution of the state and corporations to control the means of production. That's why it's so often used by socialists and communists, because socialism and communism are already heavy state control. So making big corporations with leaders that can be bribed and controlled, or making big trade unions that would be full of supporters who will drive out non-supporters and help the cause, is so appealing, and why socialist and communist states are so often fascist if they don't take direct control and just nationalize everything. The problem with the modern definition and with Cordero's definition is they still have a lot of the post-World War II combination of fear of Nazis happening again, combined with the modern socialists and communists who don't want to acknowledge that socialism and communism were both factors in the events around World War II and even leading up to World War II, because as Cordero mentioned, going back far enough at one point, the Nazi Party was actually a reaction to the prior Communist Party. And if I remember correctly, I found out recently that the Soviet takeover of Russia was also a reaction to Russian communists in, if I remember correctly, the Trotskyites, or the prior regime. I might have the name of them wrong.
Well,
the prior regime causing things to go bad before with communism, replacing it with Soviet socialism, which made things go bad again.
Well,
which era are you in the early 20s? Like post World War I Red Army conquest of Eastern Europe, like that era in the.
I think
when like Trotsky was like, I think he was in charge of the army. Guys, it's been a while since I was watching videos on this. Yeah.
So let me stop you guys for just a second, real quick, because I have a question. When it comes to, because you said that the Nazi Party, or they were calling themselves National Socialists at the time, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the National Socialist Party, you said the National Socialist Party arose in response to Germany having a communist regime before that, but I thought they were a monarchy.
Not a communist regime, a communist party movement. Like
okay,
Germany never adopted a communist government at any point. There was a strong post-aristocracy, post-Kaiser communism movement that the National Socialists, NASDP or whatever party, was reacting to.
Indeed. And then before that, with Russia, before the Communist Revolution, which I think took place either right before World War I or sometime between 1 and 2.
In the middle, you're thinking of the 1917 revolution.
Yes.
The February.
Through
There was two. There was the February one and then the November one. And the November one, they finally fully got rid of the Kaiser.
yeah, and because Russia had a monarchy as well, and then they
Yes.
switched out for
The Tsar.
communism. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that was just a minor correction to what you were saying, Hariman.
And thank
Are we
you.
correcting? Okay.
I did remember that incorrectly, that it was in Germany they got rid of the monarchy and it was communism and socialism competing with each other to take over,
Yeah.
which is
And
like two twin brothers fighting over who gets the inheritance.
yeah, who gets the Xbox next?
That's another way of putting it.
And it's funny because like what quote won was democratic republicanism, for at least for a while, known as the Weimar Republic, and then that was so porous and ineffective that the Nazi Party ended up steamrolling it and just taking over.
Yeah, it
And
just
you
took
know,
it over from the inside and appointed Hitler. And that's
yeah.
one fun little fact. Hitler was never elected. His party was voted in, he was
Was it?
appointed.
Yeah, he was appointed by he was appointed chancellor by the the president of the Democratic Republic at the time. Was it oh, I'm losing my mind. Who's the World War One general that basically supported Hitler early on, who was in charge of the government? Which
I
general
am
was
not
it? Oh,
sure.
I'm losing my mind. No, it wasn't Hindenburg. It wasn't Hindenburg. It was the other guy. Well, anyway, one of the German generals who lost in World War One. He was still in power in the 20s. Like he was like one of the heads of the Weimar Republic, and he was like one of the guys that was like helped Hitler rise to power. Yeah, that's a whole rabbit hole. Like we would need a whole like 2-hour debate just to talk about the rise of Nazism. But I think we're trying to make larger points than that.
Yeah, so it sounds like what Harriman is building up towards is that even with the original idea of fascism, if I understood what you said correctly, Cordero, of being more based on meritocracy, it was still one person or one party being in charge of everything, and therefore, because like socialism, like communism, ultimately end up with one party in charge of everything. The end result ends up being the same.
Yes.
Is that correct? Summary of your ultimate point, Harriman?
The only place I'll differ is that fascism itself is not meritocracy. It might have meritocracy as a part of it, but all fascism is the state and corporations working together to control the means of production and the country as a result.
So, Cordero, what do you
Right,
think
which
about
is
that?
well, instead of disagreeing, I was just going to add on, which is why people blur the lines between fascism, socialism, and communism, is because, as you just said, there's a seizing the means of production element to fascism, but for fascism, that's more of a means to an end, um, of raising the greatness of the nation, whereas in socialism or communism, seizing the means of production is ideological, like this belongs to the people. But fascism is, well, we have to control this because we're the only ones smart enough, and we know what to do with it. The needs of the nation are greater than the needs of the individual. But
But
either
that's
way, you're seizing the means of production, so like it gets really blurred because you're blurring method with ideology.
now, I don't view fascism as a third twin to socialism and communism.
I didn't say it was. It kind
Fascism
of is.
fascism is the tool that both of them use, and it's a tool that happens in other circumstances where if the government is too big and the corporations are pandering to the government, you end up with what is arguably fascism anywhere in any type of government,
Yeah.
where it's no longer what the government might say it is, be it like democracy or parliamentary or whatever. It's actually the state and the corporations controlling again,
Yeah.
and they're just
Oligarchy.
going to pass bigger government policies and become socialism or communism, which is like
Okay.
choosing between getting stabbed by an axe or a sword.
So the difference in your guys' definitions, from what I'm hearing, is that Cordero views the word fascism as a system of government, and Harriman is defining fascism as a technique used by the government to oppress the people, and the government can mean almost anything in this context, if I'm understanding him correctly. Like, like you said, oligarchy. That's certainly one. If it's socialism, if it's communism, if it's technocracy, um, anything that ends up being something that suppresses the will and human rights of their constituents in order to achieve whatever it is they say they want to achieve, which, from my understanding of history and my observations of history, is usually just upraising the ruling class anyway, and creating a class of haves and have-nots with no balance and no checks. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, you guys have both touched on a lot of what I was going to get to. That does seem to be the end result, and I wanted to explore why that occurs, why that phenomenon occurs, where things just sort of become oligarchies.
So tell us what you think about that then, Cordero.
Well, these all of these ideas for systems of government or for methods of controlling the government, fascism, communism, socialism, and democratic republicanism, I would say those were the big four. And what those were is those were competing ideas to fill the power vacuum that the fall of the aristocracy left. Because for centuries, particularly Europe, because we're mostly discussing the European part of this part of the world with this stuff. I think that's where everyone is. In Europe, there was centuries of aristocracy rule, and that collapsed in the end of the Victorian era, going into the modern 20th century. Even before World War One, the aristocracies were falling apart. Nobody believed in divine right to rule anymore because that's stupid. And so everyone was like, well, wait, if we don't have a king, if we don't have like a one royal family ruling everything, then how do we make a government? What do we do? And these four big competitors were the four biggest ideas that anyone had of how to make a world or how to make a government that's run by more than just one person or one party. And so here in the West or in the United States, we kind of see it as the democratic republicanism won, and it sort of did for a large part of the English speaking world. But to me, I feel that all four of these systems of government have failed. Even America, even our democratic republicanism really is, as you were just alluding to, an oligarchy that's run by an elite class of corporations that have teamed up with the government. Oh, does that sound like Harriman's definition of fascism? Interesting. And
I
like, well, and that's the thing, that's me trying to pull the veil off, is these system of governments failed. We basically just created aristocracy with extra steps. We still have an aristocracy, just instead of a king, we just have a group of kings, like
the
banks and like.
managerial class of the politically connected.
Yes.
And that was
Exactly.
something
One way or another, we just fall back into aristocracy, and all of them have done it. Democratic republicanism, socialism, communism, and fascism all just kind of end up to be this pseudo dictatorship. There's just a lot of layers of abstraction in democratic republicanism that makes it feel like the people are more involved. They basically put little Game Boy controllers in front of us, and we think that we're controlling the bus now, and we're not controlling the bus. But we have our controllers and pretend that we're part of it, so we look over at the other bus where they don't have controllers and say, oh, look at those guys, they're oppressed.
So I have some thoughts about that, but before I get into that, I want to hear what Harriman thinks.
I think it matters why we're having trouble in the United States with the politically connected class.
Everywhere, it's the whole
And
world.
and that's because we have not been truly following the Constitution for a minimum of about 110, 115 years. And I would argue possibly 160 years, as if you go back into history, some of what Lincoln actually did, he wasn't as angelic and perfect as people make it out to be, but that's a side issue.
Yeah, he
There's a
kind of
lot.
he did wipe his ass with the Constitution, but history
He,
gives him a pass for overseeing the Civil War.
yeah, which might not have had to happen if there'd been a little better negotiation. But the fact that we haven't followed the Constitution, and especially since about 19, forget whether it's 7 or 13 when they passed the income tax, and beyond there, we've just been getting further and further away from the standards of the Constitution. So
So you're
it's not the Constitution that's failing us. It's the fact that
Right.
we're ignoring this and wondering why everything's going pot.
Which is
so you're a
which
strict
is what he just said is basically what I was going to say, is that we do have a really good system in place, but human nature sort of takes over, and then we don't really implement the checks and balances that are there and meant to prevent things like this happening. Cordero, what were you saying?
I used to be what I think Harriman is a strict constitutionalist and pro-capitalist. Like, oh, we need the free market back, and we need to stick to the main tenets of the Constitution because it was a good system that we have been squandering decade by decade and eroding over time. And I still mostly believe that's true, but I'm just so you're looking at your future self, Harriman. I'm just so jaded that I'm at the point of it's all crap. There's not a single good government that we've ever figured out. The last time that a government functioned well was aristocracy. Sure, it was tyrannical and awful, but it worked. Whereas modern governments are an absolute mess. They're not what they purport to be, um, ever. And oh my gosh, like they end up becoming dictatorial anyway, but they become a scattered dictatorship. So you're not even efficient in getting stuff done. Sucks.
I'm willing to argue somewhere between either having to not only restore the Constitution, but clarify certain points to where they can't be twisted, and
Second Amendment,
redefining
Section B.
Section B. We mean it. The people are meant to have all the
Yeah.
guns.
Section
Government
B.
should not have any.
Section B. I didn't stutter in Section A.
In short, I think Dave Chappelle had a really great way of putting it. He goes, the First Amendment is there to make sure that you can call them out on their nonsense, and to make them change their policies through humiliation. Or I'm paraphrasing Dave Chappelle here, but then he goes, the Second Amendment is there in case the first one doesn't work.
Exactly. And if the government is afraid of its people, the Second Amendment is working just fine.
Yep. And the only reason why someone would want to get rid of the Second Amendment is because they are trying to then follow it up with something that you would shoot them for. Make no mistake that has been, I can say that with confidence, history has been that every single time you don't look to disarm your people unless you're trying to oppress them.
Oh no, where is that meme? I must drop that in the symposium.
Well, the chat, the 10 people watching can't, well, a couple of them actually, yeah, the only one who's watching who would see it is Angel of Speed. Everybody, nobody else is in the symposium, so
That's funny.
Yeah, or drop it to me and maybe I'll screen share it with the chat here.
Yeah, there we go. We got to use these visuals more often.
Yeah. I've got some plans to make the streams a little more visually interesting, but I don't want to spoil anything yet. So what we actually got through the main issue, as far as I can tell, a lot quicker than I thought we would.
Yeah,
and that leads me into the next the next question that I want to ask is, since we're all on the same page of acknowledging the problem, how do we fix it? Let's say we are not beyond hope and we do not need to employ the Second Amendment yet. What do we do?
We are not 3%ers tonight.
Hold on a second. So I know what you mean by that, but tell everybody else what you mean by that.
I mean, it's a meme at this point, but it's the idea that if 3% of the U.S. population rose up and armed itself, it could overthrow the government. It would only take 3% of the population.
I mean, shoot, January 6, 2021, a bunch of random people who weren't even armed almost did it. What was it?
Well,
like,
I mean, they were escorted in by the police. Did you see the footage that came out?
I've always known about that. Yes, I've known about that.
Me too. Me too. But
tour.
And it's
they were taking a
tour.
And it's so they now, and that makes me like, okay, people need to get tried for treason right now, and we need to start using the Second Amendment. It's things like that, but I'm not for the purpose of tonight's discussion, I'm not there right now.
Okay.
For the purpose of tonight's discussion, how do we use policy in a democratic sense to fix the problem and sort of try to reintroduce and get people back on the checks and balances that are supposed to prevent these types of things from happening? Cordero, what do you think the solution is?
I'm going to be honest, I don't know. Remember the part where I said I was jaded? Any significant systemic change to the real problems of government or society are always stopped, will always be stopped by the elite class I was talking about, the oligarchical aristocracy that we've created with extra steps. And we can never, it's an enemy we can't really fight against because we have so many layers of abstraction that they get to pretend that they don't exist, even though everybody knows they do. So if you try to fight against the oligarchy, they just redirect it into the dirt as if they don't even exist. You're fighting into the wind, and using the system doesn't work because they control the system. And they let just enough little stuff trickle through to where it feels like, the people are involved. Like, we got stimulus checks and COVID, and they'll pass legislation like ADA, like American Disabilities Act, and like they'll do just enough public good that it feels like the system is working. But anytime we try to make any real systemic change, that is absolutely stopped. And not only is it stopped, it's not even allowed to be a talking point.
All right. Well, I disagree, and I have my own theories, but I want to hear what Hariman thinks first.
I think it's a combination of just getting past the party primaries and getting as many good people into office, and just completely firing or ignoring. I honestly think that we might be bordering on the point where the states have to assert their state rights, and the states are going to have to arrest and prosecute politicians who work for them in the federal government, and just either shut them down that way, or the sheriffs in towns are going to have to refuse to cooperate and just completely eject the alphabet agencies so they lose their power. The people in office right now and that we get in office need to have an actual spine, because so many of them make jellyfish look solid that it ain't funny. It's possible to fix it. I honestly think that Donald Trump was on his way to fixing a lot of things, and then everything went sort of not right in 2020.
Indeed. So here's what I think. Here are my theories. We need some constitutional amendments. Firstly, forced retirement age for representatives, because a lot of them right now are over the age of 80.
Yep.
So nobody.
I can
Term
put
limits.
I can put this the perfect way.
Term limits.
I was born in '82. John McCain started his political campaigns in '81 and '82. He did not leave office until I was in my mid-30s, and he had to die of brain cancer. And
Right.
brain cancer that kept him from doing his job for over a year before he was out of office.
Right. So
Yeah,
so
I 1,000% agree with term limits. I'm probably going to agree with every constitutional amendment that you'll suggest. I've heard them suggested before. They'll never get passed. Do you have any idea what was required to pass a constitutional amendment?
Yes, I do, and I'm getting to that. So here's the thing. I'm gonna be ranting for a few minutes here. Please bear with me.
All right.
So retirement age. I do believe that's a separate issue from term limits. Term limits are also definitely necessary for Senate. Our friend ChucklyFun had when I pitched that to him, he said that might not be a good idea across the board, and he convinced me that judges would be good to have a lifetime appointment, or if they're voted in, unless they're voted out. And that makes sense to me on the merit of that's the best way to get the most consistent judgments and set the most solid precedences for legal things going forward. So that's my theory there. We need to there's a lot of things that get written into law for managing our finances or managing our businesses, right? There's a lot of regulations that the three of us are subject to that senators are not, because they very specifically write it into a lot of the bills that they put on there, that senators are exempt from these regulations. That is absolutely unacceptable. So we need an amendment to make that illegal. That no, you are not above the law because you're a politician. That makes zero freaking sense. And in addition to that amendment, I would also put on, because you're supposed to be a representative of the people that elected you and you're supposed to be a public servant, that if you are caught breaking the law or putting yourself above it, the penalty should be double for you, because if anything, you should know better. So there's my attitude on that. So and after a certain point, just we need to be a lot looser with giving politicians the death penalty. There's a lot out there that are explicitly no, I will not be careful. Okay, First Amendment. There are a lot of politicians still operating right now that are explicitly guilty of treason. So yeah, we need to punish that. And at a certain point, after you've done enough damage or the crime is great enough, you need to be in jail for the rest of your life, or you need to be dead for betraying the trust of your people. I think there should be competency tests involved, especially on the Constitution and the federal law that you have to publicly pass in order to be qualified to run. Now that has its own drawbacks, because the whole idea of democracy and democratic republics is that it's of the people, so anybody should be able to run. But those are nuances that I don't have the answer to yet. It's just kind of my theories of how I would go about it if I had my choice. And then culturally, because that's just what we do on the political side of things, we still need to fix things culturally among all of us as well. We have allowed the party system to become our football teams, and we've divided all these incredibly nuanced issues and grouped them up, some of which have nothing to do with each other, and separated them into red and blue color schemes. And every time you try to go in the center, someone from the other team go, hey, that's something somebody from the other color would say, get them, boys. And then you've got a whole nother problem there. So the clannishness needs to come out of it. We need to not be us against them. We need to get it back to the original ideas of the political parties, of like we all are one people working towards making life as good for each other in the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as much as we can. But we might have different ideas on how to get there. What's the best way to go about it? It needs to be a lot more about working together than us versus them, and that needs to be fixed through education. We need to,
and death penalties.
Yes, but we won't get those death penalties until we get proper education and the whole American people starts coming together and realizing, hey, it doesn't matter what team we're on, they're screwing all of us over, and we need to get rid of this continuity of agenda. So until we get that, and that, like I said, that's got to be done through the education system of starting with, we are all one American people, regardless of where you're from, regardless of your race, regardless of where your ancestors were from. If you were born here, you are an American citizen. And that is the most important thing, and we're going to work together. There's a whole lot of ignorance out there on how the political system works in the first place. Like, if we were to go out and talk to random people on the street, I bet you we'd talk to 100 people before we got a coherent answer, much less anything that's anywhere close to what people is. And that's just because the education system has failed. And it may or may not have failed intentionally. It was probably designed to fail so that it's easier for the oligarchs to take advantage of us. So it's a multi-step thing. But those are my theories on how to fix it. And when we get to a point of getting the money out of politics. Oh, that's another thing I almost forgot is politicians should not be allowed to trade. There's already legislation heading towards the House to be voted on for you can't trade, nor your family or anybody managing your assets. But that also leaves out enforcement. So who's gonna enforce that? Well, that's where we said, like, we get a constitutional amendment down there that says, hey, you violated the law double because you should have known better because you represent the will of the American people. I feel like at this point I'm rambling in circles, and I think I've said everything that's on my list for the most part.
Yeah.
The rest would just be brought down to local governments that the federal wouldn't really have anything to do with. So what do you guys think about everything that I've said?
Well, so here's my solution.
Cordero, go for it.
Okay. Don't worry. Mine's a quick joke. Here's my solution to fix everything. I just need a Nancy Pelosi investment ticker, and it's just a daily notice of where the Pelosi's are putting their money, and then I just put all of my money in that, and watch it day to day, and then I'll be a millionaire.
Yeah, and then you can game the system from the inside.
Yeah.
So
it's not insider trading. They're doing the insider trading. I just happen to be putting all of my money exactly where they put it.
Yeah.
And then watch it all vanish as they get the kickbacks from the green investments, and the green investments stick you with the failure.
And I get arrested for insider trading.
Yes.
Yeah, because you're not a senator. But that's the thing. You got to become a millionaire, and just get away with it long enough to become a senator, and then you can work the system from the inside.
Yeah, you have to have enough money to have middle finger money.
And then in 2040, when I run for president, I'll make you my running mate.
Sounds great. Can't wait to be assassinated with you.
All right. So with that out of the way, Hariman, what do you think?
There's a lot of layers to fixing the corruption and everything wrong. I honestly think that it's a combination of social reforms and economic reforms that uh, would make it easier to fix the actual government itself that can be done on the state level to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Lowering taxes, getting rid of or rejecting like the worst of the bullshit regulations coming from the government, like um, any attempts at doing things like regulating mud puddles as wetlands, even though they're like temporary floodplains or other things like that.
Mm.
Uh, but with lower taxes, once you hit a certain point of low taxes, the economy, the middle class, big businesses, small businesses, everything starts to grow and grow quickly and faster as time goes on. Um, so that makes economic prosperity easier. Social reform and reform of the big cities would be a huge help, where if we can drag the big cities kicking and screaming into economic sanity and not turning themselves into New York, Detroit, and California, where the
Hmm.
policies of the states are so bad that the states or the cities are so bad that the cities are just collapsing and the state is becoming just a blackout and brownout ridden nightmare. That would actually relieve pressure on the inner city minorities, where they would have an easier time prospering. And because it's easier to make businesses, that would be an incentive to have more businesses in the cities. But this has to be paired with social reforms where we actually enforce the laws that we have on books regarding crimes, because that's the problem with a lot of the big blue cities is they're just not enforcing their actual law. Chicago keeps demanding more gun laws, and they have the most gun laws over many of the other states and cities, but they're not being enforced at all. And they're just nothing's being done with the laws they have. Um, Another thing is there's like social incentives in the way that the support programs are structured that make it easier to either abuse them or for someone to end up in a situation that's bad for them and their child.
So I
Um,
apologize, Harriman, but I'm going to stop you here because I think you're getting off topic. Because like at the end of my rant, when I said that there's a lot of other things to do, but that would be more of a state level or local level kind of thing, and not really. You're kind of talking about what I was referring to. I don't think the social reforms that you're talking about, and you're talking about welfare, if we're going to be frank here,
yeah,
that doesn't like. While I do believe that is an important issue, and I have my own theories on that, and that could be a whole debate on its own. It's very new. It's a very nuanced issue. I don't think it's quite what we're talking about tonight.
true. It's part of the issue because of how everything relates, but it's not the subject itself.
That
So
is,
we
I'll
go
give
on.
you, I'll give you this. There's an old saying. I think it's Voltaire, who
Voltaire.
Voltaire, however, and he said,
Voltaire.
yeah, democracy only functions until the politicians realize they can vote themselves generous gifts from the public treasury, and we're sort of at that stage now and have been at that stage for a while. But you know, when you listen to a lot of, especially, you know, and I'm going to stereotype here because it's been a good 95% of the people I've known that vote Democrat will say things like this. You know, I'm going to vote Democrat because they're going to give me free stuff. Well,
Hmm.
you know, we can't be giving people free stuff, and we create this reliance on the government, and then that you basically make yourself into a slave through the welfare state. So you got to keep voting for the people that promise you free things, and so you just keep promising free things, and the people that want the free things and not understanding where it really comes from, or that you're never actually gonna get it, are or the repercussions of what happens even if you do get some version of it. You know, um they keep voting for those people. So the welfare system as you're describing it, yes, it's a little bit of an issue towards what we're talking about, but only in that regard. We would need to, but what you were really talking about was something totally different. So do you understand what I'm telling you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I can.
Is there anything you want to add or take away from that?
No, you made a good point on, and yeah.
Yeah. So my ultimate point that, and I got to get better about my rambling here is the reason why the welfare state is a thing is because people keep voting for it, and it helps the politicians that have other nefarious schemes stay in power because they've got this extremely population dense group in the inner cities voting for their policies of I'm going to give you free stuff, or I'm going to make it so you don't have to work.
And the irony there is the very people who are offering the solution of throwing more money at the inner cities caused the problem by throwing the money at the inner cities and making the inner city policy.
Well, it's a mismanagement of the money of the inner cities, and then this is how they put and I was talking earlier about the culture and the us versus them problem that we have here is because when people like me point that out of it's like, no, it's not that we want you to, it's not that we don't want you to be self-sufficient. It's not that we don't want you to have a house, or that we want you to go hungry, or that we don't want to help you support your kids. It's that we want to make it easier for everyone to do that. And then, the politicians will come out and say, "Oh, my opponent said he wants us to get rid of the social program so you can't feed your kids." And then they say that, and then they turn it into a race issue or whatever other issue they need to turn it to. So yeah, it's you don't need to take away. It's the king looking down on the peasants about to revolt and saying, "I don't need to take away their pitchforks and torches. I just need to convince the torch people that the pitchfork people are trying to take their torches away."
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to get back onto the larger points we were trying to make, is because that's what they do. This is what I was talking about, like this nebulous oligarchy I was talking about, where it's where corporations and governments running everything. This is the smokescreen that they throw, is they get us to fight. They get regular people to fight each other, or think that the pitchfork people are taking the people's torches, and that's how they keep anything from actually getting solved. That's the sauce right there. This is what makes me jaded, is that smokescreen will never go away, because if you try to reveal the smokescreen, they just throw 6 more, and then you go to jail.
And
I'm very, very jaded.
Here's my mentality on that, Cordero. If you give up, they win.
They already won. They already won.
Here's the thing: you're breathing. They haven't won yet. Okay, unless you give up.
They need me to breathe. I'm a taxpayer.
Well, they won. That's without the warrior spirit that our founding fathers have. Is yes, that we are
died on the inside. My spirit has died.
Okay, well, freaking get the electrodes on it so we can give it some CPR. Okay, we're gonna. I know I used the wrong phrases for that. I'm trained for these types of things. You would think I know what they were called, but anyway, you got to have the warrior spirit of give me liberty or give me death. They were not exaggerating when they said that, and it was not hyperbole. It was give me liberty or give me death. You have got to be willing to fight.
So, a bit of a white pill thing. There actually is a significant push in Gen Z to go back to the traditional solid values that actually gave us the prosperous times and were against the sort of bad policy that we've had. So not everybody is being fooled all the time. There's some of the people being fooled all the time, but not everybody. Yeah. And even though they're throwing up smoke screens and fog and fart clouds and poison smoke clouds.
Get on with it.
People are breaking out infrared goggles. They're putting up drones. They're pushing through anyway, and they're
This
finding
is an
the
extremely tortured metaphor, but I get what you're saying.
It is a torture mode.
We
I
are
don't
we
know.
are we are seeing through it. We are breaking out of the matrix. And Cordero, I need you to do me a very important favor.
What's that?
Okay, so because I just said we're not being plugged into the matrix anymore. If I ever quote Andrew Tate again, I need you to get my gun and kill me with it.
What was the Andrew Tate quote?
We're not being part of the matrix anymore.
Oh, well, I mean, can you really call that an Andrew Tate quote?
I guess
when he's quoting pop culture.
I suppose, but by the same token, he's been saying it a lot lately.
Yeah, it's not like he coined the phrase,
I guess, but like I've been hearing it a lot lately, and I've been hearing it mostly in the context of people quoting him. So it's like in my mind right now, the phrase, but
That's like Games Workshop trying to copyright Space Marine. It was there before. It will be there long after.
Yes. Who do you think you are?
The Fine Bros trying to copyright the word react back in 2010, I think that was.
Wait,
I remember that.
They tried that?
Yes, they
did. I think they wanted a quarter every time someone said it.
Send me a link.
Oh god, that was a big old YouTube drama, and I think like 2010 or 2012. I don't know. My memory is fading in my old age. But do we have anything else we want to say, or should I get into audience participation?
Well, did we get to everything we wanted to talk about? I know I brushed over what I said about everything is just basically an aristocracy now. We got into that, and we were talking about how to get things back, or get things to a point where things are better for the common person.
Okay, so
I just still feel that after a century or so of trying to figure out how to make a modern government, we're still in the okay. Let me be a little bit more optimistic now. We're still in the infancy of these modern governments when you compare how long we had aristocracy or like divine right to rule to how long we've had modern governments. This is absolutely the beginning of it, and and all of these growing pains absolutely show. And to me, the interesting takeaway is that we have these ideas of like individuality and freedom and people having their rights and doing whatever they want, but then we ultimately end up making a system that re-centralizes everything to a small number of people having power. Ergo aristocracy with extra steps. And it's like, is that something that we're just going to have forever, or is that something that we'll work out of? Can we actually get to a point where we can make a government of the people, or will it always just have to be some kind of compromise? Or maybe humanity can only function from the top down. Maybe an ugly truth is we actually do have to just have somebody in charge.
Well, let me tell you what I think. It's a little bit nuanced, because yes, you should be able to do whatever you want, but we have clearly seen in history that, we'll get these corporatocracies, or we'll get, things like company towns, and, what is it? Things like we were seeing during the Industrial Revolution, which were human rights violations. But when you break it down of like capitalism and communism, there's a direct opposition in the core ways that they function and the philosophies that they start out with. Communism basically gets down to one for all, and you don't own anything, and you don't own anything that you work for. Everybody needs to rely on everybody, and that's sort of...
Is man not entitled to the sweat of his brow?
Right, and they give it... but you can't... The very essence of communism goes against human nature, is that you're supposed to have leadership to have the communist revolution and knock down the bourgeoisie and then set up communism, but then the leadership is supposed to dissolve and let communism just work. But humanity doesn't work like that. They need the leadership. So capitalism goes hand in hand with things like democracy and democratic republics. and constitutional republics, where the Constitution lays out your human rights. That the Bill of Rights is universal, but you, by virtue of being human, has the right to free speech, has the right to defend yourself, has the right to not have your home invaded for no reason, has the right to privacy, so on and so forth.
You have the rights before the government was there.
The government does not give you those rights.
What is there?
The government does not give you those rights. The government's job is to help you defend those rights. But what human nature goes, when everybody has that, there definitely does need to be some regulation. Otherwise, the pendulum will swing towards the oligarchy or the aristocracy. So that's up to the people to be responsible for themselves and be vigilant and diligent and educated and strong, and use the checks and balances that are put there by capitalism and democracy to make sure that doesn't happen. And with communism, you can't do that. You get assigned your role regardless of whether or not that actually is what you're good for or what you want to do. And with capitalism, you're allowed to pursue to the best of your ability that which would make you happy, and the ecosystem of the economy will develop independently from there. But and I'll say it again, some history has shown, even American history has shown, that some regulation is necessary. Otherwise, you get monopolies, and monopolies turn into corporatocracies. So you got to be. Now the tricky part is figuring out where the balance is, and then having the diligence to adhere to it and not let it go too far in one direction or the other. Because
freedom is eternal vigilance.
Pendulums and personal responsibility for yourself and maybe your family, right? Especially your family, right? Like but you need to be strong and self-sufficient first and foremost, so you don't need the government. But then I understand that there are people who are not as capable as others. Do we just let them die? I don't think so. I believe, in communism, they are left to die, because in communism you can't have that kind of waste. But in democracy, hand in hand with capitalism, that allows for excess wealth to be there that could support charity systems or other small public programs that can help people like that can't really help themselves. And even then, you help them get to a point of dignity and having as much self-sufficiency as possible. So that's my rant on capitalism versus communism, and why capitalism. And you might have noticed I'm using capitalism and democracy interchangeably here, and that's because I believe they go hand in hand as a concept, and you really can't have one without the other.
Yeah, I won't fight you on that one. They do historically have been, like, the capitalist countries have been the democratic republican companies.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean when I say democratic republicanism, right? I'm not talking about the Democrat and Republican parties.
Yeah, so in case any of the 8 people watching don't know, Democratic Republic basically means that it's you have your rights, and the government functions within those rights.
It's simpler. It's simpler than that. A republic is basically a government by committee, and democracy is basically the direct vote of all citizens. A democratic republic means you vote for and elect the committee that runs the government. That's it. That's democratic republicanism, is we the people vote for a committee or a republic to be in charge of us. But we vote for people to be in charge of us, and that's basically democratic republicanism. It's very simple. Most democratic republican, most of those systems have also been the capitalist ones. Could a democratic republican system also be socialist? Yes, you can argue there's a lot of places that are already like that. Some European countries, there's other places that consider themselves, democratic republics that are adopting socialism. I don't think that the raw ideology necessarily gets in the way of of government by the people. Um,
So
it sucks because tonight I really wanted to stay on the broad strokes, but it's so easy to get into the weeds and really talk about specific stuff. And I really wanted to talk about broader political science and political theory, which is why I like sticking on the history side of things. And basically, I'm still on the side of, as jaded as I've been, I still want a true capitalism with competition and where competition drives innovation. And the fact that your competitor can overtake you, that means that you are incentivized to serve the customer well and make a good product.
yeah,
That's
you
that's
you
what
want
competition
freedom,
does. Yes,
the free
that
market.
I
Just
do.
with
I do want a free
guardrails in
market,
place.
and as Brony was saying, some amount of regulation is necessary. I think
Yeah,
most people agree with that. But the thing is we don't actually have capitalism right now. We have a technocracy.
corporatism.
Yeah, there is a
Not
handful of top companies that run every single industry, and there is an illusion of competition. If you go into the grocery store, it looks like there's all of these different food products. Wow, look at these different food products and companies. There's like four companies that own everything in the
yeah,
grocery store.
six
Four.
six companies own all the news stations.
It's a
Disney
very
owns everything.
and they control the entire industry, and you
Yeah,
can only break into the
we
industry at their behest. And
may I?
all market share is divvied up between the major players in all the industries, which is a trust, which is illegal, but it
But
happens
it's
anyway.
not. The laws aren't being enforced,
They're not being
and
enforced. We don't actually have capitalism. So when people rail against capitalism, I'm like, actually, I'm with you. It's just that's not what capitalism is. I'm against what you're against. But I wish we had real capitalism.
So
Just like people say, I
let
wish we
me
had
let
real
me
communism. Real capitalism hasn't been tried yet. We just need.
may I? May I?
well,
That's very important to this.
yeah, go for it.
The problem in the United States right now is all the problems that people are blaming on the free market are actually a result of the corporatism that Cordero mentioned,
Yes.
where it's the big companies
Yes.
working with being huge companies that are blocking competition and working with the government and just making it harder for small businesses to thrive, and bullshit is being passed where it's harder for small companies to do things. And that's actually been one of the good things about the internet, where it's honestly been like 30% of what's so important about the internet is the commerce side of the internet has allowed people to go independent so much that um, they don't have to go through the corporate systems. You can become a self-published author who becomes so big that the big publishing companies start begging you to sign to them, and you don't have to sign if you don't want to because you've already built your fan base yourself and
Hmm.
you don't need the corporate arm, or you can become your own company. Um,
Entrepreneurship. Yeah. The
yeah,
internet. The internet brought back entrepreneurship in a big way, which is very, very important for creating the next generation of wealth. And we've spent the last couple decades trying to squash the entrepreneurism of the internet and make it
So
controlled by Amazon
yeah,
and
we
the government.
ultimately,
but
yeah, we
it
do have
works
these. Uh,
because somebody always jumps up as a company and says, I'm a small company, I'll help these small people, and people still have the option to say, I'm just starting out, I have this idea that's complete so far, I need X money to complete, and the better times they actually complete, and sometimes they don't, but
one problem we run into is the antitrust laws are not getting enforced, and it's gotten to such a point that a lot of people's halfway decently viable business strategies is to get bought up. Like they'll make a product and then they'll get it functional and just enough to be almost considered competition to something bigger, and then they will sell to the bigger competition. One example I can think of is Waze. Waze had a good thing going against Google Maps, and then they sold to Google Maps.
And usually those sales are forced. Like a lot of times, it's like, well, either you good job on the innovation, you little shit. Either cash out or die.
Oh, you have your own space here on Parlor. We're going to go to Amazon and get you accused of being evil when you didn't do this. And
well, that's something different. Now that sucks too.
That's the same thing. It's
well,
the same vein.
Just the reason behind it is different.
The situation I put forward was a little more consensual. That was what Hariman described was some underhanded political tactics, right? And that's a huge problem too.
And that sort of thing happens in big companies, just corporate rating where like.
So the solution to this is to stay small. You don't need to make $1 billion. Never go public. Never sell out.
Yes. Keep the rights to your own product, or if you sign a contract with somebody, after so much time, the rights come back to you. Period. And
if the contract that they're pushing on you doesn't have that clause, don't sign it. It's better to not sign. It's not your soul is not worth any amount of money.
You have to retain creative control. You have to retain the rights to the merchandising and all the other things.
Mm-hmm. And if they rip off your product, that's what copyright law is for.
Yes, and by writing something, your work should be copyrighted and protected.
And don't get jaded and don't get intimidated by their expensive lawyers. The law is supposed to be the law, and it's not supposed to matter how much money you have, and just fight it. They don't want you to fight, because especially if they're on the wrong, because that's going to cost them more money. And what they'll try to do then is they'll just try to delay the legal process to rack up your fees to a point where you can't write. But that's the hardest part of fighting that. But it's still worth it to try to fight and use the press. Like when you're being oppressed by a larger corporation, use your free press to tell everybody what's going on. Try to get the public on your side. Just never, ever stop fighting as long as you're alive. So what I think, is we definitely have these problems that we've been talking about tonight, especially in America, but also around the rest of the world. I think I've laid out some halfway decent theories of ways that we as an American community could help to solve these problems. And if those don't work, then we become 3%ers. And I don't give a frick who hears it. I'm ready. I was not happy about those last 2 elections getting stolen. And I will say that I don't give a frick.
Both of them.
Yeah. So that's what I think. What do you guys want to add or take away anything from that, or should we move on to audience participation?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good to go to audience participation. I hope you're right. I hope there's still something to be optimistic for. It just gets harder and harder to stay optimistic.
Listen, 2 of the things that I mentioned, and like I told you those theories in private a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
But 2 of them are on the floor, or on the Senate floor to be voted on right now, and those 2 are 3 of them actually. No insider trading for senators, no term limits, and
term limits is a great one.
Yeah, term limits and abolishing the IRS and getting rid of the I think it was which amendment was it? I can't remember off the top of my head. Was it 17th Amendment that put in the income tax?
Oh shoot, what number? 19th Amendment was women. Yeah, it might have been 17. I want to say 1913 was federal income tax.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about the number on the constitutional. But anyway, those 3 things are on the floor right now. So, you know, as much as I try to remain centrist right now, I am just going to say flat out say vote Republican. So and make sure you hold your Republican senators who are supporting this accountable, so that, you know, we don't just give them power and they're like, well, you know, now that I've got the cushy senator position, I don't actually need to do it. No, if they don't do what you hired them to do, get them out of there. That kind of thing. And yeah, I hope we can get those three things going in the next 2 years here, and that would help start laying the foundation for all the other stuff we want.
Speaking of the IRS, do you know how every other country in the world does their taxes? In the modern world, basically does their taxes. It's
No.
the exact opposite of us. You know how you have to like go do your homework and report everything you have to the government, and then tell them what you owe them, and hope that you're accurate enough and that they believe you. In other countries, the government already has this information, and by the way, the government already has all of your income information. They have all of it. In other countries, the government has that information, and they send you a bill. They just say, here's the taxes you owe, or here's your check because you had over withholding or whatever, and that's it. They send you a bill, and if you're like, wait a minute, you forgot my blah 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 deduction, then you like send something in saying, hey, this should be adjusted, and then it gets adjusted. It's completely backwards. We don't have to. There doesn't have to be this system where we pretend we're not lying to the government, and the government pretends that they don't know we're lying to them.
Well, and that's another thing too.
Well,
that just plays into the other stuff we've talked about tonight, because you know what causes that problem is lobbying. So we got to get the lobbying out. We've already said that tonight, and nobody disagrees.
We just need post-scarcity.
Higher taxes empower the lobbyists, because higher taxes and more complicated tax codes mean that it's easier and more profitable for the money spent on a lobbyist to return, like $1 million spent bribing a couple senators will return $1 billion because the taxes are that high. That's why low taxes on everybody are better, because once you hit a certain point of low enough taxes, the big corporations just don't want to bother spending that money, because why would they bother spending so many millions when they're already getting a ton more anyway, and they can just keep doing business?
Yeah. All right, so let's move on.
So audience, yeah.
The first one I got was Doug's Film and TV. Said, I remember season 5 opening for Friendship is Magic with the cutie map tackle communism. When you look at them, you saw in Starlight's Village all having the same cutie marks. Okay, so here's what I think about that.
Wow, we went the whole debate without making a reference to Equal Town. That's impressive.
Well, right. So now we're gonna actually live up to our name of Brony debates here, and here's what I think about that. And this is the Cordero again. If I ever do this again, you get my gun and you kill me, because I'm about to quote Jerry Pete here.
You could just not.
Yeah, well, I'm about to quote Jerry Pete here because he had a really good point. Starlight's Village. I don't even know who that is. Starlight's Village was not it wasn't communist. It was a cult.
Yeah.
It was a communist cult.
Well, it was a cult that looked like. I mean, we get communist vibes from it because M.A. Larson wrote the songs for that episode to sound like communist anthems, right? So that's kind of, we've got that correlation hardwired into our brains, you know, through genetic memories. I don't know. I know I'm talking nonsense, but you know, we hear that and we know, regardless of where you come from, we hear that type of music and we know what it is. But there was nothing economical about what Starlight was doing. It was all ideological of we are all going to be the same, and we're all going to be the same person, and there is no individuality. Communism is, those roles still exist. It's just, you don't own anything that you do. Yeah. And you
Starlight
don't get
Glimmer
to choose what you do.
did not discuss the means of production. She
Yeah.
was just like, we all act the same in our town. So
It's
like, who
can,
knows how she would have scaled that up to an
yeah,
entire
you want to be
country?
a baker or you want to be a tailor, you can bake and you can be a tailor, but you can't bake better than the tailor can bake, and the tailor can't fit clothes better than the baker can, right? So it's everybody is equally as good at everything.
Equally good.
Yeah, so which
Yeah.
is an ideologue, not anything to do with government
Yeah,
or
yeah. It's not particularly It feels communism is to our
It's
Western-minded brains.
the result is the same. Everybody is leveled down to the same thing or the
Yeah,
same restricted level. It's just
it's more
the
like a
means
Twilight Zone
justify
episode than a political
the
science lesson.
all right.
um,
Next up.
actually, since we hit on communism and socialism again, there's one point I actually want to make regarding socialism. No matter what
Uh-huh.
modifier you put on socialism, it always becomes it's always either rejected or it becomes full-blown socialism in the end. Democratic socialism, you vote socialism in once, you don't get to vote again until the government breaks down and everything resets.
Oh,
Um, all the other like whatever they try and say the new socialism that'll work is, it's still socialism. It's just got a pig skin on it or a sheep skin on it or a wolf skin on it to make it look like something else.
Mm.
And it's always going to fail because socialism and communism don't work. Free
So
market free markets are the only economic system that actually functions. And even Karl Marx admitted this in his manifesto, where he said that we need to get rid of capitalism, but he doesn't know what to replace it with.
yeah.
And capitalism works, and Marx said that himself.
So let's see here. Trent Jerome says, just so Brony is
Hey,
aware,
Trent.
I posted the following in the comments of one of his Ever Free Northwest videos. He said, please come back. Yes, Trent, I did see that. Here's the thing. Right now, I'm out of a regular job. So until I get a replacement for that income, Ever Free Northwest is off the table for me. If I'm working again or somehow quintuple my Patreon money with it before July, then I'll be at Everfree Northwest. Also, they need to get rid of their COVID policy. I hate it, and I don't just hate it because I'm like because I don't know what I'm talking about. I hate it because I know what I'm talking about. And that's a whole nother debate that I wanna have one of these days, is actually get one of those people on to talk about how retarded the COVID policy is, and I will continue to
Lingering.
say, yep,
Yeah,
I,
lingering COVID policies in 2023 is really cringe.
and I will continue to say retarded regardless of how mad Twitter gets at me for it. In fact, these days I'm a lot more likely to use the word retarded because Twitter got mad at me for it.
Yeah.
Suck it, Twitter. You are not real people. Anyway,
What's your COVID policy? If you're sick, stay home.
yeah,
That's the COVID policy.
that's the COVID. I mean, it's the only one that works.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Twitter got so mad at me at the beginning of 2022, calling me all kinds of things, and it's like, no. First of all, I know more than 99% of you getting on my case, and okay, so you with all your appeal to authority, I am the authority. Okay, that you're trying to
I
appeal
am the law.
to. Yeah, but I know just as much or more than anybody you're trying to quote. All right. Anyway, Paladin Pony T says, okay, so this is in response to what Cordero was saying about fascism being a meritocracy. Is that part of it went wrong because nobody could decide who was the best and brightest, and those who thought they were the best and brightest were not. What do you think about that?
Yes. That happened. Correct.
Mm-hmm. So that's and that's something with with all the communist regimes is whenever you get this communist revolution and they overthrow the government, well, you got to put all these you still need to fill all the roles, that need to be filled. You need somebody to run the education department. You need somebody to run the medical departments and things like that. And but the only people that you have that supported your case were your fellow communists, and they just spent their whole life being uneducated communists. They don't really know what they're doing. So they screw everything up, and then it all crumbles. But if you speak out, then you're not for the communist regime, and you're an enemy, and they're just going to execute you. And all this happens within a week of the revolution. So let's see here. Cosma Inspira says, education is always the solution. I read all the time and try to understand other points of views. Yes, that second half of that, I believe, is the most important thing, is that you've got a big problem we have right now, and I was just talking about it a second ago with Twitter getting all mad at me, is that you can't try to dehumanize people for disagreeing with you. That is a huge problem our culture has right now.
Yes.
Does anybody else want to add on to that?
Yeah, that you're just absolutely correct. That keeps happening. Like, the great thing about these debates that we have is, one, I mean, we're all talking to each other so we can be calm. But I think that anyone who comes on this show or participates in this, we understand that when we have disagreements, it's almost always not a difference in values. Like, pretty much everyone who we interact with on the show, we want the world to be a better, safer, happier, and more prosperous place for everyone. That's what everyone wants. And the political disagreement comes from, how do we make that happen? Because the world is so complex and there's so many factors that play in, that two people can have the same goal or values, but have completely different ideas of how to carry those values out. So that's how you can easily have somebody on the far right and the far left who really kind of want the same thing, and that's just for the world to be a better place. And once you start going down the path of, well, if you think this, then that is inherently and objectively evil, and you must represent those bad values.
It's
like
the false moral high ground
Yes.
that people put themselves on, where their solution is the only one that works.
Yeah.
If you disagree, you're a monster.
Yeah.
And that's actually, I will honestly argue, that's a part of either tyranny or what socialism and communism become when enacted in reality. Because socialism and communism only work in the Harvard faculty lounge.
Communism, like the strategies of communism to get communism put into place, is to dehumanize people that disagree with you like that. Karl Marx talked about it explicitly in his books of demoralizing it through culture and subversion and just hating everybody that disagrees with you. The reason why I am because here's the thing. When I grew up in a very conservative family, and they still are, and I'm pretty conservative myself. But the whole reason that I call myself center right is because I do believe that the solution to a lot of the problems lay in what an American would typically describe as, right-wing policies. But I certainly have talked to enough people who disagree with me from a sympathetic point of view of trying to understand what they've seen, their life experience, and I have lived enough of it myself that I understand the nuance of where they're coming from with their problems, and on a lot of cases, I agree that they are having, the other side has some of these concerns, and some of the policies that they put forward would be good in some degree to help solve those problems. And I've ultimately come away with the mentality of if a problem can have more than one cause, if the cause of a problem can either be A or B, then odds are it is a combination of both. And if a problem could have more than one possible solution, the solution to the problem is either A or B, it usually means it takes a little bit of both to solve the problem. And the only way you're going to understand that is by sympathetically talking with other people that have different perspectives. And when I say sympathetically, I mean coming at them with the mentality not to prove them wrong, but to learn about them and their struggles and what they're trying to accomplish so that we can get on the same team. And that is the whole purpose of Brony debates. And every time I go to a convention and I do a Brony debates panel, I open and close with it. If this is the skill, these are the critical thinking skills and sympathetic skills and empathetic skills that I'm going to try to give you today so we can stop having frickin' Twitter be the way it is.
Well, Twitter has the disadvantage of being anonymous, and
is it though? People put their names on
it's there. Even with the name there, you don't see that person's face. You aren't really talking with that person.
It's impersonal. It's impersonal.
It's impersonal. It's anonymous enough that there's a disconnect. So it is so much easier to get into a screaming fit argument from both sides.
Yeah, just don't do that.
On all levels.
Just don't do that. Don't put the ad hominem out of it. It's such a simple thing. You should have learned it when you were 3. I don't know why it's so hard for everybody.
Well, people say that the joke / punchline of the movie War Games is that nuclear war is a game where the only winning move is not to play. No, there are ways to win nuclear war. That's when nobody is willing to fire a weapon because nobody is willing to destroy the world. Now, going on Twitter and arguing, that's a game you don't win by playing. You win by not playing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Moving on here. Eldritch Dragon says, Brony does not have info that could lead to the arrest of Hiller. Bang! He says, oh no, he took his own life by 2 shots to the back of the head while hanging from a tree. Yeah, that happened again recently. And it was ruled a suicide. I think
it's amazing how many people the Clintons know who commit suicide. They're just the luckiest people ever.
They gotta you know what? We need the Guinness Book of World Records to come out. Most friends who have committed suicide goes to the Clinton family, and I think they're in the 60s now. Like it was 50, like 52 not too long ago, but that was like the last time I saw that was 2016. I'm pretty sure it's up in the 60s now.
Well, I'll say the most important ones are Vince Foster and Ron Brown.
Tell us about those real quick.
They were both connected to the Clintons and could have spilled dirt, and both of them ended up dead.
Yeah, here's the thing, and this is a mistake I keep seeing people make. If you have condemning evidence against a politician, don't get on your freaking Twitter or don't get on whatever news channel you have or magazine you have and say, on this date I'm going to release all this information. I'm gonna blow out everybody's ears to get this point across. Just freaking put it out. It's a lot harder to commit suicide. It's a lot harder to commit suicide right before you release the data. If the data
July
is already
2nd, I'm releasing all of this information about the Clintons. I hope I don't get depressed between now and then.
Right. That's a pattern I kept seeing get repeated, and every time I see it, I'm like, no! And then sure enough, they're dead 2 days before they were going to release all the information. Just freaking do it. It doesn't need to be a PR stunt.
For a little more information on Vince Foster and Ron Brown, Vince Foster was found dead by what was ruled a suicide in the middle of a park, where one of the few witnesses to anything in the area drove by and swore up and down that Vince Foster's car was not there and it was a different car. But the report written after the interview with him said that he said that it was Vince Foster's car, and Ron Brown
Right.
was the Commerce Secretary under the Clintons, and he is the Commerce Secretary where at one point the Clintons put the high-tech electronics chips under the Commerce Secretary, which got sold to China, and all of a sudden China's long-range missiles stopped blowing up halfway.
Huh. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so you know, I
well,
was talking
we're
earlier
we're
about
all
how
on the list now. We're all on the Clintons list now.
yeah,
oh,
well,
everybody's on the Clinton's list
this
anyway.
this is all publicly available information, and this is why I was talking about earlier about how much treason there is that hasn't gotten prosecuted,
Yeah.
and we need to get better about that.
The
And
politically
they're gonna-
connected
And
ministerial.
there's really only one way to deal with treason. It's been the way that so
A stern talking to.
yeah.
At the absolute minimum, jail cells that never open for the rest of their lives.
Paladin and Pony T says "ow" in response to me, turning up my mixer, and Trent says I turned the volume down just in time. Let's see.
They're gonna report that I hung myself by toilet paper in my prison bunk bed.
Yeah.
That was the Epstein thing.
Yeah.
Epstein
And all the
people
security cameras. That's another thing. All the security
Yeah.
cameras suddenly stop working whenever something important happens.
Yeah. At
Isn't
the
it
exact
funny-
right time, and
At
the
the right
people who are
time.
supposed to be watching are asleep or busy. And
Isn't it funny how they don't even have to try? They don't even have to try to make a good cover up. It's like, hey, there's all these holes in the story, and it's like, yeah, sure, okay. What are you gonna do about it? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you know. It doesn't matter if you know the truth or if it's obvious or if anyone with a brain can figure it out. They just shrug their shoulders and say, you can't stop
Yeah,
it.
and that's the type of thing we need to use the Second Amendment over, and we need to start using the Second Amendment over that. I'm just gonna say it. I don't give a frick. That's what it's there for. This exact type of thing.
That's why I think it's going to come down to the states asserting the law and arresting the corrupt in state court, and stating that no, the federal government is not its own entity. It is the government of the states for the people, so that the states can actually do this instead of the federal government. Because
Just like
at
Morgan
this
and
point, I
Morgan.
would argue that the
For
best
the people.
solution for the federal government is to wall off Washington, D.C. and cut the phone off, block the signals, and
Cut the power.
then investigate them as they come out one by one. And odds are you're going to put 90% of them in jail at minimum.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Drain the swamp just like Trump promised to, and then he showed up and picked out his favorite alligators.
Trump thought it was still business world, where the businessman who stabs you in the back yesterday is going to be your best friend tomorrow. In
And
politics,
vice versa.
no. They stab you in the back, they stab you in the face, and they'll lie to your face.
They stab you
And they'll trip
17
you.
Not at
times.
to Brutus with the
And-
knife
yeah.
on the back. It's at to Brutus why repeatedly in my face.
Yeah,
Lying to me about
and
it.
then they stab your mom, and then they say that you're the one who stabbed your mom.
Yeah, it's
pretty
crazy.
bad. But I do have good news.
Tell me.
The name of the general, the former World War I general in the Weimar Republic who helped Hitler rise to power, was Erich Ludendorff.
Sounds like a Ludendorff.
Yeah.
I had nothing of intelligence to add to that statement, so I just said that.
It was bothering me, and I actually looked this up like 50 minutes ago, but I couldn't find a place to interject it. I know nobody cares, but it would bother me if it wasn't on record that I figured out what general it was. It was Erich
I'm glad I
Ludendorff.
could help you get that off your chest. Let's
Thank
see
you.
here. Rusty Helm said, it's time for me to get back to work, but I'll leave with one question. What kind of government do you think Equestria has, and how well do you think it actually works in the show?
What was the question? Ghost question?
Rusty Helm says, what kind of government does Equestria have?
Oh, God, I mean,
And how well does it work?
Magic Fairy Sunshine Land world. I there's something there. It's this magical happy thing that just works.
It's supposed to work the way a monarchy with democratic local elements is
they don't-
supposed to work.
No,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is Equestria Girls, where all we see is his high
Wait.
schools trying to kill each other.
Did he say Equestria or Equestria Girls?
He said Equestria.
Okay, yeah.
Equestria is a monarchy.
Equestria is a constitutional monarchy. They don't come out and say it, but it's very. I mean, read between the lines. It very much is, because obviously Celestia and Luna are not tyrannical, and I don't think that they're like a pure, absolute monarchy. I'm pretty sure that Equestria has like a government. I'm pretty sure Celestia and Luna are balanced by some kind of parliament or something, even though that was never shown up in the show.
There's mayors who can go to Luna and Celestia.
They have local elections and all that stuff. It has to be a constitutionally limited monarchy. There's no way it's an absolute monarchy.
There's a word that hasn't come up yet tonight, localism, where as much as focused on the local thing as possible. And speaking of taxation related to that, up until 1913, Americans kept 100% of their earnings. Despite this, America still had schools, colleges, roads, railroads, streets, subways, the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, who managed to win 8 wars and fight 1, the War of 1812, to a draw. And so the argument there is, why do we even need to give taxes to the government?
Here, taxation is theft. I love it.
And we get less back for taxes than we do having it ourselves.
Here's a joke I've made in a few of my videos, and I'm surprised nobody's picked up on it, so I'm just gonna explain it right now. In my King Sombra videos, at least once, in every single one of those videos, King Sombra goes up to somebody's booth, grabs something off of it, walks away with it, and goes here. I'm taking your taxes. That's because it's theft. I know exactly what I'm doing when I make that joke.
I'm here to tax you.
I walked right up to one dude and went, you're behind on your taxes, and then just grabbed a basket of like pony figures off his booth and walked away with it. And then as soon as the camera was done rolling, I turned around and walked it back and put it back on there. I said, thank you very much, and then I bought something from him.
Oh, I figure everybody you do that to knows, or
I'm not
That's great.
horrible. If I'm gonna beat you up in the video, I'm at least gonna ask you if I can first.
Yeah.
Let's see here. The last one that I've got is Eldritch Dragon says income tax was, quote, temporary, and property tax is unconstitutional. So property tax.
That's a very Jeffersonian take.
While I'm on the train of property of taxation is theft, I'm pretty sure that some amount of local taxation is necessary to help fund your local amenities such as fire departments and garbage collection and things of that nature. And a lot of not ambulances, but a lot of hospitals get local level funding paid by taxpayers in order to operate. So
is property tax theft or not?
So I don't know is ultimately what I'm getting at here. That's one of those things where I can understand both sides, and I am not educated enough to give a definitive answer.
Brony, I need you to tell me what I think.
I don't know. You think Rarity's the best pony. That's what you think.
Yay, Rarity.
You think
horse.
Sunset Shimmer is D tier.
Okay, listen now. I was willing to play along, but you went too far.
That's all I've got there. Did anybody else see any chat they wanted to tackle?
Oh, I think that's good. I exhausted myself this debate.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I guess I'll wrap it up there then.
It's been really good.
Yeah, Hariman, tell me one thing you learned.
I learned that mine and Cordero's views are actually pretty darn close to each other. It's just how far we're both down the rabbit hole.
You know something? I knew I knew that, but part of the reason I wanted to have this debate is so that I could show you two that. Because when you guys were having that discussion, you know, that started this way back when, I was like, you guys are coming from the same place, and but also having two separate arguments without even realizing it.
Yeah, we were talking past each other to a good degree.
Yeah.
Indeed.
There's actually
was that
one comment I want to answer
Okay.
real quick. Because Mina Inspira asked why my character has fangs. My character actually isn't me. I don't actually have a pony sona or a fur sona or a character of mine.
You're a horse?
So my character Hunter Apex stands in, and that's both a nickname and a title. He's actually a carnivorous draft horse, and depending on the universe, he's either part Arion, which is a classical killer / carnivorous type of horse. In other universes, he's part Kelpie, or he's something else where he's carnivorous instead of just a regular horse. So he's got fangs because he likes steak.
Alrighty then. And so Cordero, one thing you learned tonight.
I learned that we really need to go back to king and country. We, the common people, are just not smart enough to govern ourselves, and we need the guidance of a divine ruler to guide us into prosperity.
Now, if I may add a little to that,
Sure.
I think going back to following God's leadership is more necessary than having a king, because the position of king can be corrupted. But if everybody is following God's guidance on how to conduct themselves, we will make a country to the standards that God sets out, which are actually, that's actually what the founders did in making the Constitution. They just didn't write the Constitution as if it was for a
So you want a theocracy? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Not a theocracy. I think a democratic republic is the proper structure because it allows focusing things locally to keep too much power from centralizing. I want a country with Christian morals, but not a theocratic government, because having the church directly in control causes its own problems. But having the standards taught by God is actually a good thing, and what we strayed away from when we stopped following the Constitution, because the Constitution is based on the Christian standard.
I think that's an entirely separate debate.
I have been I have been out trolled by being taken seriously. I was trying to be as goofy as possible on my final thoughts.
I'm not trolling. I'm serious.
I know you're not trolling. You've out trolled me by playing it straight, and you got me.
I am become troll by not trolling.
Yes,
I have
correct.
Paradox.
Exactly.
Right. Now I gotta dress up like Hal Jordan and try to either destroy or save the world. I don't know.
This just in: Hariman gives worst possible take ever. Is asked to leave.
The best possible take. We had a good thing. We just weren't the moral enough people to keep it going.
Well, and if anybody remembers his question from, you know, his question from the beginning of the stream, the very beginning, he said, "How long will it be? This game we're play of how long will it be until Hariman sticks his foot in his mouth?" There it is.
Found it.
Roughly around.
I think you just swallowed your own hoof in counter.
I actually think that churches should pay taxes, but here's the thing: if churches are participating taxpayers, it means that they're allowed to participate in political discourse, which means that if churches paid taxes, it would be completely fined and legal to back political candidates openly.
I think two things about that.
It goes hand in hand if they're paying their taxes.
The
they get to have their voice.
Taxes, they should not let themselves be silenced by 30 pieces of silver. 2,
Yeah.
a lot of churches need to start reading the Bible because a number of them are just completely off the rails.
Alrighty then, we're getting into a different topic here, and I'm trying to wrap this up because it's almost a 2-hour stream at this point.
We're starting debate too. Remember, this was your idea. You said you were going to stream double, and that means 2 debates every week.
Yeah.
So all right.
I still need to figure out my schedule for that because everybody wants me to have both debates on or both streams on Friday, and I don't think I can pull that off. So I got to figure out which one I'm going to do when. So
you think your audience knows what they want? They don't know what they want. Just give them what you got.
I know, right? I ran those polls on Twitter and I said, okay, do you guys want me to do 1 stream a week or 2? Everybody said 2. It was like 90% said 2 streams a week. I said, cool. When do I do the debate? Do I do it on Tuesday or Friday? Which in retrospect, I realized Tuesday is not a good day for me anyway. And they said, do the debates on Friday. And then I said, okay, so what day do I do the gaming stream? Do I do that on Tuesday or do I do that on Friday? And at this point, I'm just experimenting with my audience. And they said Friday for the gaming too. And I'm like, oh, crap.
That's funny. Okay, so obviously you're streaming every Friday. And then just pick whatever other day is good for you. And then just do it.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't need a Democrat.
Please not Wednesday. Wednesday's bad for me.
Yeah, I'll figure something out and I'll announce it as soon as I do. But I gotta strategize a little bit here. But anyway, thanks to everybody who tuned in. This was a wonderful conversation. I had a ton of fun. I would say, I definitely learned a bit about history tonight. And I'm grateful for that. I used to fancy myself as a history buff, but I haven't really tried to study it in a little over a decade at this point, so I guess I got to give up that title.
History YouTube is fantastic. I can give you a bunch of channels that are very, very well put together and are fun to watch. That's why I've remained a history buff is because I'm plugged into HistoryTube.
Yeah, please do, and I'll update the description with what you give me. Anyway, have a great night and a wonderful weekend, everyone. If you would like to be on the show, I'd love to have you. There are plenty of ways to support the channel and get on the show. You can check out all those links in the description. I'm very grateful to all of those who support the channel, especially the $10 and up tier. This big long list: Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministry, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Senko, DJ Skywalker, Rein-Kun, Morningstar, Pony Cordero, who's with us tonight, QFlash, Billy Henline, Alden MacManx, EasyModeGamer, Kanto Acrylic VA, Mr. Sonic 31, Ridge the Hedgehog, Alicia Lynette, Zeta Z, Sniper Nighter, and Dark Malcontent, author of the Metaverse series. Please check out all their links in the description. They make some pretty good stuff too. Cordero's got some really good stories he's working on his film fiction. So anyway, have a wonderful night. I don't know exactly when I'll be on next, but you can catch me next Friday, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. God bless, stay safe, and I'll see you all next time. Say goodnight, everyone.